I'd rather create something that others criticize than create nothing and criticize others.
If you have high quality product behind the bar, it's like a weapon.
It's not about the figures, it's about who those figures are.
The Hospodpreneurs Podcast.
I'm gonna drink this beer.
Yeah, let's crack them.
With James Henderson.
Hello and welcome to episode 79 of the Hospodpreneurs Podcast. Alex Stefan joins me today as the founder of Oomami, a new social marketplace for small food producers that aims to bring the farmers market experience online and connect consumers directly with producers. Celebrity chef Matt Moran has seen an opportunity here and already backed the company. I've been told by their team that they're also in discussions with other well-known professionals. Prior to Oomami, Alex studied and then taught entrepreneurship at Swinburne University for over half a decade and has also founded a cold-pressed juice company. He shares some exciting stories like cooking 2,000 pizzas a day in Rome and explains why raising venture capital can sometimes be a disservice to shareholders. Hello and welcome to the show, Alex.
Thank you, James. Been looking forward to this, actually.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm really excited to get into the episode. As you know, the first question I like to ask is, what is your crazy hospitality story?
My crazy hospitality story, I started working in hospitality when I was 15. My family owned a restaurant in Bondi Beach, and I was working from 6 a.m. till 3 a.m. 7 days a week. And that is actually quite common in hospitality. It happens in your smaller family-owned food establishments. When the family's involved, they don't get the perks that employees would get due to legislations. Yes, that's my crazy story. Oh, and without pay.
That's definitely crazy. Yeah, the family, I've heard a lot of stories, not necessarily on the program, but a lot of stories working in family businesses that are very similar. But I guess there are pros of that and really teaches you things.
I learned a lot. I learned things at the age of 15 that many people are learning in their early 20s. When they're at uni and maybe they work part-time or they've just finished uni and they're just doing something in hospitality before they get their big break in whatever career they want to go into. Yeah, I did learn a lot. I matured very early and I was able to go into Europe and work in hospitality there, and then back in Australia work in some fairly high-profile venues.
Where are the sorts of places that you worked maybe in Europe that sort of led you to be able to work in high-profile Australian venues?
I started at the ground floor in Rome, worked at one of the largest pizza venues in Rome, over 1,000-seat capacity. I was running one of the wood-fired ovens there. We were putting out between 1,000 and 2,000 pizzas a night.
Whoa.
So you can imagine like the pace of it.
I love pizza, but I don't imagine you do anymore.
No, I actually I don't eat pizza as much as I used to anymore because of my increased interest in health awareness and health consciousness, wanting to eat right and all that sort of thing. But yeah, I know how to make a pizza.
You mentioned health consciousness there. What does that mean to you?
Okay, so I actually was raised with a high degree of health consciousness. We were vegetarian growing up, so always paid very close attention to what we were eating, in what proportions were we eating things. For instance, how much of your overall diet is raw fruits and vegetables versus cooked food, because it does make a difference. So I've carried that through. After I finished high school, I studied nutrition in Sydney. I then also studied organic agriculture. So I've always had an interest in healthy eating, health and well-being, and food production in general, and cooking. I worked in kitchens for many years as well. It's an interest in health and well-being that does actually go back to my childhood.
How does that come through in your work now?
I started and ran a cold-pressed organic juice company for several years. So I'm trying to do things that I believe are good for people, are good for society, that I know to be good. And I then transitioned into Oomami as a way to help small farmers and small food producers break into the mass market. As we know, a lot of small producers have difficulty getting into the big supermarkets. And basically, if you're not in a big supermarket, it's very difficult to reach the mass audience if you're not in one of the major supermarkets. If you're relying on farmers markets and your own website and maybe the odd small retailer, you're not going to really break into the big market.
Should people be aiming to hit the mass market, or can they have successful businesses in a niche?
They can have successful businesses in a niche, but also niches don't necessarily by definition need to be small. So you can have a niche, but that niche can actually be quite large. So it's not necessarily for everyone. I don't recommend it for everyone, but there are small producers who do want to grow their businesses, and they should be be allowed to do that. And so we provide tools that enable small producers to basically just automate their businesses, their production, their invoicing, and they can basically stay small or they can grow as big as they want because now they have the tools to be able to do that quite easily without relying on the big supermarkets and the big distributors.
You've obviously got a background in entrepreneurship as well, having studied it and taught it.
Yeah.
How has that affected what you've done post-education?
Yes, as you said, I did study a Masters of Entrepreneurship Innovation at Swinburne University and then started doing postgrad research, and I was invited to teach, which I ended up doing for 6 years. I taught the MBA classes, the MEI classes, as well as undergrad business classes. I initially went into it thinking everyone can be an entrepreneur and everyone can start big successful companies and all that sort of thing and raise venture capital and all that sort of stuff. And I still believe many people can do that. They just don't have the tools or the knowledge on how to do that. But I'm actually now thinking it's probably not even necessary. There are a lot of small businesses that are doing quite well that would probably actually do themselves a disservice by growing quite large and raising capital and all that. So it's a case-by-case scenario. It does depend on what industry you're in, what specific niche or product you're producing and selling. There are a lot of products in the food industry that are not necessarily unique to you. There would be most likely quite a few other companies making something similar. Yours obviously would probably be better, but still quite similar. So that's something where you probably wouldn't be able to raise capital for that unless you really were able to ramp it up and prove that the business is extremely successful before someone will actually give you money in that kind of a scenario. If you have something that's extremely unique and no one else is doing, and you've already done a little bit of testing, consumers absolutely love it, or stores or cafes love it and want to stock it, then you will be able to raise money a lot easier. So I've just come to the conclusion where I don't think it's necessary or even advisable for some businesses to try to go down that path.
Can they save themselves by branding themselves appropriately?
Yeah, good point. Branding is the number one factor, and it's a factor that a lot of food producers tend to overlook. I was actually in this facility just last night with about 60 other small food producers, and when they give you their business cards, you can tell straight away whether the branding is on point or not, and that's what I saw last night. So a lot of these businesses have absolutely fantastic products, better than anything you would find in any supermarket. You know, whether it's pasta sauces or lasagnas or beverages, etc. Where they do fall down is in the branding part of it, because when a person is looking at a product on a shelf, they don't know what it tastes like. So you can have the best product on the planet, but if that packaging and that branding doesn't adequately represent the quality of that product and the one next to it looks better, even though it may taste worse, you've just done yourself a disservice. So you most likely will have just lost the sale. So packaging and branding are number one. Quality of the product, I'm sorry to say, is number two. So that may go against the grain, and I know it does go against the grain of a lot of food producers out there, but that's the reality of it.
Who is doing food branding well, in your opinion?
Good question. Have a look at companies in your niche that are successful. So if you make kombucha, which are the top 5 kombucha companies that you can think of, and look at their branding and compare it to yours? Then you'll know who's doing well. Just speaking of kombucha, take Remedy as an example. They're putting a lot of emphasis into branding, packaging, and marketing. I have seen some other kombucha companies which actually make, to be honest, make a better product. It's just me. But their packaging and branding is way behind in terms of the level of attention to detail that's been put into it. A lot of them look like they made in a garage, and they may be, I'm not sure. But in terms of taste and quality, they are actually better because they probably are made by hand with that love and care and attention to detail when it comes to the taste and the way it's made. So you need to bring someone into your team who can focus on the branding and the packaging so that you can keep focusing on making a fantastic product, and they can then start working on the area that perhaps you're not as good at.
If you're the technical person, though,
yeah,
right?
If you're the guy that's coming up with the recipes and making the product, and branding strategy and packaging is not your forte, which I think it may be with a lot of food producers.
Because I'm the marketing guy.
Okay.
So for me, I need the technical people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So if you are the marketing guy, I would expect that your packaging and branding and strategy would be spot on, but perhaps your products may not be as good as some others out there. In that case, case you then bring in a technical guy to help you improve that product. That's actually trickier than doing it the other way around. It's not too hard to bring guys on who are fairly good at marketing and branding. It's really hard to find someone who makes a great kombucha, because if they do make a great kombucha, chances are they'd probably already be doing it. What we've done a number of times is we've actually put ads in, because people will be wondering, okay, so how can I do that? Yes, I do have that problem. How can I find someone who can help me? And by the way, I'm not talking about paying someone either. I'm talking about for free. So how can I do that? Well, the way we've done it in the past is we've put an ad on a popular job site, and we pay for the ads a few $100s. It's not onerous. And we basically tell people what we're about, and we're looking for someone who's willing to join our team as an equity shareholder. So you are going to either give this person cash or you're going to pay them in shares. And you need to really sell them on the vision, because they're essentially becoming an investor. But rather than putting cash into your business, they're putting their time. They may not be able to do it full time, obviously, because we all need to eat and pay our bills. So they may work for you part time, which is really all you need actually to start anyway. 1 or 2 days a week, or even weekends. Someone who can focus on your branding, your packaging. That's really all you need, and that's how you do it.
I'll dial it back to a different speed. What does an exceptional hospitality experience look like to you?
I think an exceptional hospitality experience, one that is up to date in terms of market trends. So for instance, I told you earlier that I'm vegan actually now. I have been vegan since I was a teenager. And one thing that I know following the industry is that the percentage of consumers that are vegan is actually growing dramatically just over the last 10 years. In Australia, it went up from 5% in 2010. It's now up to about 9% in 2016, so 3 years ago. And what irritates me is when I walk into a restaurant and they don't have any vegan options on the menu. That clearly tells me that whoever made that menu is not up to date with what's going on. And I've actually seen this a lot. Cafe managers and head chefs and all that sort of thing, they're in their element 7 days a week, or most days 9 to 5, or if they're doing dinner, through till midnight. Many of them don't have time to actually know what's going on outside of their restaurant in the big wide world of food. So I have noticed that a lot of professionals in the field are actually a little behind the 8 ball when it comes to knowing trends and that sort of thing. And in many cases, their customers are actually a step ahead of them. So I think that's important. So that to me is a big marker. Right as soon as you walk in, sit down and look at the menu, that's the first thing I notice. How on point is the menu? How relevant is the menu to the customers that are walking in?
So that defines an exceptional hospitality experience.
Yeah. If you can find a menu that caters, providing it's not a specific venue, like seafood only, obviously, but if it's just a general sort of, let's say a general Italian restaurant or a fusion restaurant, they're not catering to any particular market or niche, I'd expect to see a list of recipes or food products on there that are on point when it comes to current trends.
What's one way, outside of listening to programs like this one, obviously, that industry professionals can stay on those trends?
You'll actually see it a lot in the media, but what I also do is I scour YouTube. I find YouTube to be absolutely awesome when it comes to education, pretty much any field, but particularly food. There's a lot on there, and the way you can know that whether something is really trending is whether the person that posted the video has a large number of subscribers. So if someone, let's take Fully Raw Christina on YouTube, has, I think it's like 1 million followers or something, and she teaches veganism, you can tell straight away that there's a huge interest in whatever it is she's talking about. It's a very quick and easy way to know what the trends are in food. It's not very hard.
What if that metric, because that's one metric to measure it by, right? What if the people listening are important people and they're catering to a niche of people who are the active players in that market, but the market isn't 1 million people?
If you are listening to someone talk on a specific food topic and they don't have a huge number of followers, or anyone talking about, like if you look at all the people talking about that one topic, usually it won't be just one person, it'll be several people. If none of those people have a large number of followers on any of their channels, then you can know that it hasn't at least yet become a topic that is hugely relevant to a large percentage of the population.
Yes, but before it hits the mainstream,
okay, so you're asking about how do you pick a trend before it becomes a trend?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking?
That's where the question's heading. We can take it anywhere we'd like.
How do you pick a trend before it becomes a trend? Very, very good point. And it's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. You have to become a future futurist. So there are a number of people who are futurists who we see in documentaries and so forth. There's one in particular I'm trying to think of. I can't remember his name.
Jason Silver's the guy who jumps out at me when I think of futurist. He's a big...
Yeah, there's another guy I'm trying to think
profile
of.
one.
He's been in quite a few documentaries and so forth. But it's funny you asked that. I was actually thinking about this just the other day. Because I spend a lot of time thinking about the future, not just of food, but just the future in general. I have an interest in all sorts of topics, from technology to spirituality to all sorts of things, to consciousness. I'm often looking at, okay, what are some trends that start to crop up? I remember when, just going back to this vegan issue that we were talking about earlier, so I started looking at YouTube videos about that topic probably back in 2009. And back then, the people that I mentioned, they didn't have a large following. But I don't know, it's an instinctive thing, I suppose. I just kind of thought it made sense what they were saying. It was backed up by science. And I just followed them for a couple of months. And you could see the number of followers and subscribers increasing month on month. So then I thought, wow, there seems to be more and more people becoming interested in this topic. So maybe that's a way to do it. So you just follow someone for a short while, or follow a topic for a short while. Initially, you may notice that it doesn't have much interest. But if you can see that interest growing, and you can quantify that interest, like if it's growing by 10% per month or 20% per month, it's growing, full stop. That's what you know. And then you can extrapolate that out 10 years into the future. You'll have a rough idea of what's going to happen in the next 10 years with that particular topic.
It's an interesting way to look at it, because picking trends is something that many people across the board have tried to do. Finance is my background, formal education anyway, and that's something that finance guys have been trying to do for a long time.
Well, one of the other things also is we have to face the fact that sometimes trends will actually go against our beliefs, against what we like. And we have to be careful that we can separate what we personally believe or what we personally like or dislike from the trend that's happening. We have to be willing to accept that a trend is happening in spite of the fact that we hate it, or we're not interested in it, or we don't believe in it, and be willing to just accept that. So we can see that with a number of other industries, and usually industries that don't like a particular change that's taking place and try to fight it, they tend to lose. One classic one that I'm seeing at the moment play out, and we're all seeing, is the internal combustion engine versus the electric motor when it comes to cars. So the auto industry has fought over many years to keep electric cars off the roads, as we've seen in the past with a number of documentaries and stuff. And so the same thing happens in all industries. And we all tend to have a bias. So we need to learn to, I think, become honest with ourselves and say, yep, I don't like it, but that's what the trend seems to be showing. By doing that, I think we'll actually be better off.
Once there's this attention shift, I spoke with someone recently about this concept, and they didn't believe in themselves for many years because they didn't have a formal business education. I said, you don't really need a formal business education to pick these sorts of things. You just need to understand social trends.
That's right. Let's say you work in a cafe and you're behind the coffee machine all day long. And I know a lot of people who are. I guess, first of all, when you're not behind the coffee machine, don't waste time. Listen to great podcasts like this one. Use YouTube. And it can be entertaining and fun and interesting. But I guess the important thing is, A, to maintain that open mind, as we were saying. But B, to actually use your spare time to learn about all these things and become aware.
Yes.
Rather than just watch a movie or play a game. So if you do want to become an expert on the current trends and what the future is going to hold, not an expert so you can show off or preach about it, but just for yourself and your own business, then that's the way to go about it.
100%. What I've noticed is that, and the reason that I say it's about understanding social trends, is that next step from that analysis. After that analysis, it's then realizing people's attention shifting over time. And when people's attention shifts, money shifts. The question then is, if you're a producer or if you're a business in any industry and you're in the mainstream market and the market is shifting their attention, do you double down on your niche or do you shift with the mainstream market?
Okay, right. So it does depend on what your particular industry is doing. So for instance, let's take the case of the internal combustion engine. It is possible that you can have two technologies running simultaneously, okay, and they're both doing really well. Case in point would be Apple and Microsoft. It's not necessarily true that one's going to replace the other, okay? However, when you look at the case of the internal combustion engine, it's clear that one is going to replace the other. So which one are you? Are you the Apple versus Microsoft? And can you continue to exist exist in spite of the fact that there's this other one coming up and seems to be doing really well? Or are you in an industry or in a space where you're actually going to get replaced? So you need to work out, can I continue to coexist into the long term in my particular space? Can my products continue to be relevant and wanted by the market? Or is it going to be replaced by this new thing that's just come out? So that's something you need to figure out.
Fantastic. Alex, I'd like to ask you what you're learning about at the moment. What is it that you're exploring?
What am I exploring? I'm exploring a lot of things, but I suppose I would say one of my main interests is consciousness in general and the way that attitudes are shifting worldwide and why they're shifting worldwide. So that's been one of my main interests. And as a part of that, what I'm noticing is that people are wanting to move away from products that are mass produced, that are made by your massive worldwide companies, sold in all the big supermarkets, wanting to connect with their food, wanting to be more food conscious. So when I say consciousness, there are many different levels of consciousness. Food consciousness is one of those levels or aspects. So food consciousness has been an interest that I've been following over the last 20 or so years, and there is a definite trend on every level when it comes to food. So farmers markets have become much more popular over the last 10 years than they used to be. However, technologies and ways for consumers to obtain what it is they're looking for have not kept up. So farmers markets still run, 1, 2, 3 or 4 days a week for a few hours. That's hardly going to cut the mustard, pardon the pun. So we need technology. And what I'm finding is, as I said earlier, people who are in the industry, the people behind the coffee machine, the person that's driving the tractor out in the field, they're usually actually behind the 8 ball when it comes to the latest trends. And their customers are actually a few steps ahead of them in their awareness of where the market's currently going. And so the guy on the tractor or the guy behind the coffee machine isn't actually aware that something's happening and he's not even aware of it. So there is a huge shift. People wanting to connect with where their food comes from, people wanting to shop at farmers markets, but then the market is not responding fast enough. We don't have farmers markets that operate 7 days a week, at least 12 hours a day. We don't have that yet. As well as online technologies haven't kept up, and that's actually why I started Oomami, by the way. It was a way for consumers to be able to shop directly from food producers, farmers, brands, whatever. Any small food product manufacturer, be able to do so 7 days a week and get delivery to their home. And I mean, there are other platforms that do something similar, but the problem is that as a consumer, I can't actually use any of those other platforms to do my weekly grocery shopping, because otherwise I'll end up with 20 separate deliveries because there's no central warehouse. Each of those products needs to be delivered from the actual producer themselves. So I thought, well, that's not good enough. If we're going to allow consumers to be able to access products directly from manufacturers or farmers, we need to make it at least as convenient as what's available through the big supermarkets on their online stores. And that is, A, I can access thousands of products in one place. B, it's one transaction to purchase. And C, I get one delivery, not 20. And I only pay for one delivery, or preferably get it delivered for free. So that's what we've created. So we've created an online platform with a central warehousing model that allows the consumer to order all those products direct from the producers, but it comes through our warehouse.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
What was your process of raising capital to build this project?
Yeah, okay, so we initially self-funded quite a lot, several $100,000 went into the project, self-funding it. We were fortunate enough to get 2 government grants, and so you need to know how to do that or have someone on your team who can help you do that. And that actually does help quite a lot. It gets you part of the way there. There are websites where you can see the list of all grants available in Australia in one place. So if you don't know what kind of grant or how to apply for it or who to apply to, just search for grants in Google and you'll find that there is actually a central website that shows you all the grants. So we were able to go through that, work out which ones were relevant to us at that particular time and apply for those, and we actually got 2 of them. We've also raised some money from angel investors. So for people wanting to raise money from angel investors, there are a number of websites that are good for that. My personal favorite is the AustralianInvestmentNetwork.com. There are a number of others such as Gust, GUST.com. There's also AngelList.co. Although I personally have to say that Gust has not been any use to me. I don't think it has the audience in there that would be relevant to what we're talking about here with food and that sort of thing. They're more looking at things like biotech and artificial intelligence and all that. So they're not interested in food. It's the wrong place to go for that sort of thing. AngelList, we've had some limited success on AngelList.co, or Angel.co it's called now actually. So those platforms are one way to get funding. I have dealt with angel groups in the past on a number of occasions, and I've actually found those not to be very worthwhile.
Why is that?
Okay, when you put people together in a room, you end up with a herd mentality. So if someone in the room doesn't like your particular opportunity that you're presenting, then everyone tends to just follow them. So I've found that to be the case. They claim that it enhances their deal flow, it enhances their ability to screen deals and all that. I actually think it's a detractor. They're not able to think critically, they're not able to think independently, and actually, if you look at the stats, you'll actually see that angel groups invest less than most of these platforms. Like, you'll raise money quicker on some of these other platforms than you would through an angel group.
What does the future of the hospitality experience look like?
Okay, technology now enables cafe owners and restaurant managers to buy direct from food producers, bypassing distributors. So I honestly believe that over the next 10, 15 years, we're actually going to see food distributors go out of business big time. They may actually become an endangered species because technology like Oomami allow both consumers and businesses to purchase direct from the producers. The second trend I'm seeing that's going to be coming is, okay, so the Australian food and groceries industry is worth around 110, 115 billion. A large portion of that goes through the major supermarkets. We're going to see a massive trend where as technologies become more available and consumers can get direct access to brands and producers, you're going to find less people shopping at the big supermarkets and more people shopping, dealing direct with producers. That's probably one of the biggest shifts that I see coming, and it's on the horizon. It's definitely coming.
Are there other costs involved for producers to make that shift?
There are costs, but those costs are a lot lower than what they're currently paying by dealing with a distributor or a retailer. The other thing also is currently producers are locked into this system where they can't effectively sell direct to a consumer. It's quite inefficient. They have to pack orders themselves. They're not really set up for that sort of thing. How do you pack one box of ice cream and send it to Perth cost effectively? So technology is now enabling all that sort of thing to take place. So whilst there is a cost associated with using those services, such as Oomami, it's still a lot cheaper than going through a distributor who's going to take 25 to 35% of your wholesale price, and then they sell it onto a retail. And so you miss out on all that margin.
Thank you very much for being on the show today, Alex. It's been a pleasure to have you on. My last question is, who would you like to hear next?
That's a very good question. I think hearing from small producers, the experiences that other small producers have is quite useful. So I know a number of small producers that I think would actually be able to give a lot of value, maybe even as a group, more than one at a time, have 2 or 3 in the room at the same time. So there's several that I could recommend. I also think that a lot of value can be gained from highly successful managers of hospitality businesses, such as Moran and some others who I know personally. I think them sharing their experiences on how they grew their businesses and what they did differently, there would be a lot of value as well.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, James. Much appreciated.
The show today was produced by the in-house audio team at Hospopreneurs, led by Jake Olver. Voiceovers were by Angus Brennan. To learn more, head to hospopreneurs.com.